Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to tell your life story, sharing your tale with strangers. We all have a story to tell and each one of us has a unique one. The ability to communicate our stories to others is a vital one in order for us to show them who we are and how we express ourselves. And ultimately, what drives us and what kind of experiences have we gone through. My life has changed a lot in the last couple of years, and I've thought a lot about how to convey that to other people, and in a way that's authentic and genuine to my true self. It is a way for others to know me better, but also to keep a history of what I've done in the past. It's like a past history that's shared on from story to story. And sometimes we don't do a good job giving people the right context or the proper impression at the first introduction. In my 20s, I really struggled with telling my story and what my life was about. But as I've gotten older, I've really understood who I am and also what kind of stories that people want to hear. And the combination of the two really draws people in so that they experience a lively story from you. So this video is really to help you have a guide on how to tell your life story the best possible way. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my tips on telling your life story, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. When I talk about telling people your life story, I mean telling people that you don't know who you are and what you stand for. And you do this because you want to deepen the connection between you and the person you're talking to. A good story draws people in and gets curious about the life you've lived, and for them to get a sense of who you are right away at the introduction. On the flip side, a bad story can lower their opinion of you and they might not want to talk to you anymore. I think telling your life story is a really important skill for you to have, especially when you're creating connections with people, both strangers and people that you know very well in your life. Stories are a mini presentation of who you are, what you do, and what motivates you to do something. For example, stories of great courage can showcase your grit and courage in the face of tough times. And stories that show you working hard on something might show your attention to detail on that particular subject. As I've matured, I thought a lot about my own stories and which ones that I want to share with other people. So part of this has really been my YouTube channel and how I tell the stories to other people. What do I want to share from my life? And what do I want to leave as an impression to other people watching this channel? So I'm suggesting a few things to keep in mind when you're telling a great story to other people, and how important it is to provide context and relate to the person that you're talking to. So here are my tips on how to tell your life story. Number 1, relate to the audience. This is the key to telling your life story to other people. For them to engage with your story, you need to tell them why it's relevant to them. It may seem weird because you're the storyteller and it's your story, but finding a way to relate to others is a great way to engage with them. They'll find your story more interesting and they'll want to ask questions about your story. Relating to other people can be difficult, especially if you don't know the person that you're talking to. But even if you just know a little bit about that person, try to relate with it as much as you can. And depending on where you're chatting at the moment, you could bring that context into the story as well. Be it at a bar, a work function, or even a party. When I was younger, I would used to tell stories about how cheap and thrifty my parents were, and how that impacted me in my present extreme cheapskate ways. This focus on being thrifty helped me to relate to others that were going through the same thing at the time. The sharing of similar experiences can be very powerful when telling your story. So finding a way to relate to that person when you're telling the story is paramount. Some key helpful tips are to know whether or not the person is introverted or extroverted, and what kind of hobbies they're into so you can launch yourself in a good starting chat. So do your best to relate with the person that you're talking to and telling your story so you can draw them into your world. Number 2, embellish when needed. Life stories, when told with complete context and logic, are messy and sometimes quite boring. Think of regular stories like graduating, starting work, and starting a family. Your own stories can be quite unique, but the overall context of it can be quite boring to present. The usual logic of how life goes can be quite similar to other people, so they already know the story that you're going to tell, albeit with a few variations from your own personal life, which may be relatable to other people, but maybe not quite as exciting. When this happens, it's okay to embellish a little from the stories that you're telling to other people, to make them just a little bit more interesting and grander. For example, telling a story about your audience's favorite restaurant and saying that it was good, but in reality it might have been just okay food for you. Telling others that the food was great is one of those white lie kind of things. Maybe the restaurant just had an off day and it served you okay food rather than great food that your audience had tasted before. In this scenario, embellishing a little does no harm to both parties. Or telling a story about how your car broke down in the desert in 110 degrees heat. but it was only 90 degrees Fahrenheit, but it felt like 110. In my stories, there's often a little bit of embellishment just to make the story pop out more to the audience. Usually they are focused more on exaggerated moments that I might not have actually felt, or things that I should have said to certain people but I actually was just thinking about it. I make sure that the things that I embellish doesn't have a negative effect or outright lying to other people. And it's mostly inconsequential stuff in the context of their life. So when telling a life tale, sometimes it's okay to embellish a little just to make your story stand out just a little bit more. And it helps to add color to your story, so it helps them to retain that information more and know more about you. And it helps you build that connection with other people listening to it. But be sure that if the person actually questions you, that you tell them that you're embellishing in the moment. Because embellishment can spiral into outright lying if you're not careful. And if the other person finds out about it, that you're lying to them, they will lose their opinion of you. Number 3, lying consistently is hard. When telling your life story, never lie or mislead other people to thinking that you're a different kind of person or have a different personality. And the other aspect of this is that if you do lie, you have to maintain that lie within that story and other stories that you tell. And maintaining that lie gets exhausting if you're doing it all the time. So don't do it in the first place. So comparing the differences between lying and embellishing is like seeing a flower on the side of the road and saying that it was filled with color and vibrance to just seeing an ordinary daisy. And that would be embellishment. But if you just told people that you saw a daisy but you actually saw a rock, that would be lying. Embellishment enhances the story with imperfect details about your story. It's little details that might have been lost to memory perhaps. And lying is just making the story up from your mind. In my early 20s, I never went to any music festivals or concerts. But that didn't stop me from telling other people that I went to them to impress them. And so when people question me about it or ask specific details, I always end up falling on my face because I lied. And I always lose face and the other person's opinion of me afterwards. Because clearly I had no experience in music festivals whatsoever. And in the end, I should have just told people what I liked from the beginning, not even mentioning music festivals in the first place. So this tip is pretty straightforward. Just don't lie about your experiences. It will always come and bite you in the butt in the end. And if you are successful in the first couple of interactions, then keeping up the lie can be very hard in the long term. Number 4, come from the heart. I think that most life stories focus on the logical and the straightforward things like relationships that you had throughout your life. And the only emotion that you tell from those stories are the relationship emotions that you feel from your spouse or loved one. But emotions in the context of your life story can be very powerful if you know how to weave them into your story. Because at the end of the day, people can relate to the primary emotions that we all have in life. Experiences like loss, loneliness, stress, and fear are all common emotions that stories can be told from. And when you tell a story with emotions, you can connect with other people on a deeper level. They can probably relate to exactly what you were feeling in that moment as you're telling the story. When people ask me why I moved to a new city, I rarely gave them the generic answer for my work. I gave my answer usually in the form of emotions, why I emotionally made that choice to move to a new city for work. Because at the end of the day, I was moving to a new place and it was very fearful for me because I was starting brand new. And for others to relate to that experience of starting over somewhere new without knowing anybody. That formed a deeper connection to whoever I was talking to at the moment. And it's a far more nuanced and complex answer than I just moved for the money. So whenever you're telling your life story, be sure to sprinkle in your emotions and the why behind what you're doing. It can help you to emotionally connect with others who might have gone through the same thing and will be able to sympathize with you and form a deeper bond with you in that story. So come from the heart when you're telling your life story to other people to form a deeper bond with them. And number 5, get on the struggle bus. Sharing struggles through your stories with other people is a great way to connect with them, because most likely that other person has gone through the exact same struggles as well. When we share struggles that we have in our lives with other people, we are being vulnerable to them. And if they've gone through similar experiences, they can relate with that vulnerability to you. But deeper than that, we are not sharing a part of ourselves that's glamorous or that's talked a lot to others. People usually like to talk about their successes, not their failures or their struggles. But it's usually the struggles that we've gone through in our lives that ultimately became our successors later down in our lives. People just like to skip to the ending of how they accomplished this or that, but the context is important for each life story. I really like hearing how people struggled and how they got to where they are today. because it shows them who they really are as a person. And you start to understand their motivations and what they really want to do in life. And many times it paints a better picture of who that person is than some generic story about their career life. In many cases, I've shared my dating stories with other people in my life, and they were not necessarily successful stories. Because at the end of the day, nobody really cares about your dating successes. We all want to hear the juicy gossip and details of the struggles and failures. Because the struggles that you went through ultimately shape who you are and how you got to where you are today. And my struggles were far more interesting than my successful dating stories. So when you're telling life stories to other people, you can relate to others by telling your struggles about certain topics. Because as a culture, we love the protagonist story about a hero who struggles in the beginning and in the end gets what they were going after. It's the same with a person's life story as well. So get on that struggle bus and tell people about your struggles to form a deeper connection with them. So here are my general thoughts on telling your life stories to other people. In terms of what stories are shareable to other people, have a few generic ones ready on hand. So that means having a few key stories ready for you, like a great career story, a great relationship story, and a great party story to tell. Generic stories that have the broadest range for you to be able to relate to others. And if you want to dig in deeper, have specific stories that highlight and shines on your personality. So at its core, telling someone who you are really quickly. For example, if you're a Star Trek fan, if you're a festival music goer, or if you're a camper or hiker. Stories that are very specific in nature and can tell you a lot about who you are as a person. And that story can have all the classic hallmarks of who you are and what your experiences were. And lastly, I just want to mention that not everybody will be receptive to your stories, regardless of context or relatability. Some people might just glaze over and not be interested regardless of how expressive and embellishing your story can be. In those cases, it might not be you, it's just that they're not in the mood for a story. Or perhaps they just don't want to hear you talking in the moment. In those cases, you can either try again and pivot to a more interesting story that has more context to them, or you can quit talking altogether. Just don't be too upset when someone doesn't want to hear your life story. Not everyone is interested. So those are my tips on telling your life stories to other people. How we share the most important details of our lives is important to relating and providing other people about who we are as a person. And through that, we can deepen the connections with other people that we're telling the stories to. You can draw from the experiences in your life to form stories that are both relatable and tell others who you are. A good story can pull the audience in, relate to them, and provide the proper context of who you are as a person. A bad story can upset and turn off people that might have been receptive to you telling that story. But with a few key tips to keep in mind, we can keep our audience engaged, enthralled, and absolutely interested in our life stories. So the main keys are to relate to the audience, come from the heart, and get on that struggle bus. So go out there and tell your life stories to other people. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below and share your mini stories of who you are. And I'll see you next time.